Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Signature Morning on Signature TV. Thank you for joining us. Okay, now let's move forward. Safety without dignity, they say, is oppression. And dignity without safety, they say, is chaos. In aviation, we need all of it. You know, recently, everything that has been happening with IBOM Airline, with the passengers, with Kwam One, who is the music star, you know, while he was trying to stop the value jet from departure in Abuja, all our airports are making image and headline for no just cause. And to unbundle this show today with me is an expert and a legal practitioner who is going to talk with me on the show, and his name is Barrister Daniel Ogbe. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, sir. So let's move forward. What do you think happened there? What played out there from your own perspective? You know, just share the moment.
Basically, whatever may have transpired between the crew, the cabin crew of IBOM Airline and Miss Comfort is what I refer to, as far as we are concerned, as hearsay evidence, because we aren't there to witness live what actually transpired between the two factions. Nevertheless, from my own perspective, I think irrespective of whoever may be right or wrong in the entire episode, the situation has to do with the inability of both divides to handle the issue in a proactive manner, or better still in a rational manner, and which has given rise to some legal implications and consequences. What I'm trying to say is this: I wouldn't be in a better position to know actually what transpired before the fiasco, the one that was presented to the public, being the manner in which the lady was manhandled in the course of maybe the officials of the aviation sector who are there present, as well as the members of the management of IBOM Air, decided maybe to apprehend her, or better still, to take some steps as envisaged by law in holding her accountable for whatever misdeeds she may have perpetrated, so to speak. In other words, the issue has to do with the failure of leadership in the aviation sector in Nigeria. Because in Nigeria, we tend to be more reactive rather than being proactive. I say this because if we should take a holistic look at the ongoings in the aviation sector, you may not have much difficulty in coming to terms with the fact that there are many fundamental challenges that have befuddled this particular facet of our existence. And maybe in our reactive manner, a time shall come when another issue will crop up that is different from what has happened some days back. And in our reactive manner, we will respond to those issues, and those of us who are in the legal profession will dissect the legal aspect of what may transpire, and that will be the end of it. So basically, what happened, in my own estimation, is the inability of both sides to address an issue in a manner that falls within the ambit of civility. Because assuming, I still presume her innocent, assuming that the lady actually erred, and that her actions caused the other side to get irritated, which necessitated the developments that followed suit, then if the information available in public domain is true, she may not have acted in a manner expected of a reasonable human being to act. Likewise, even if she's culpable, even if she did what she did, from what you have seen so far, it's obvious that the management also failed to respond to that issue in a manner envisaged by law. Because as far as I'm concerned, unless the video clips making the rounds, those video clips, if they are false, but if the content of those video clips are anything to go by, obviously the fundamental rights of this lady have been violated. And in other words, if this lady decides to take up some legal actions against the management and the authorities, she may, subject to whatever may happen in court, she may be able to be placated in the court of law. So both sides to a great extent are wrong. But if there is any party that is prima facie wrong, it's even the management of IBOM Air and the officials of the aviation sector in the country, because we wouldn't be in a better position to know what the lady did before that reaction.
Okay, so from what you have said now, I believe that they were wrong, but people are also saying that she shouldn't have been banned, she shouldn't have been, arrested and put in prison, if not for the, for the NBA and other authorities having to come and help her. this thing wouldn't have happened. Like they wouldn't have released her. So at that point, what is her right? Why was her right trampled upon while others are let to go?
I beg to differ to a great extent with the assertion that she shouldn't have been arrested. Because in our country, we are a country governed by laws. And I also know as a fact that it is said that all animals are equal. But some assert that some animals are more equal than others. The problem has to do with the fact that justice was dispensed hastily or in an expeditious manner. Unlike what was the case unlike what obtained in the case of Pan 1, who carried out what I refer to as a more serious misdemeanor, and he was led to be. Rather, the government of the day was patronizing him. Whereas in the case of this lady, it was a case of an underdog who was manhandled and who was made to operate under the heavy weight of the law in the country. In other words, the controversy has to do with the fact that you have two different individuals. One, prima facie, seems to be a powerful individual, and the other individual, a commoner, with due respect to her, a commoner. And in which case, our laws became very powerful when the commoner was the person to be dealt with. Whereas when that particular powerful individual also carried out similar act, the law was nowhere to be found. When I mean the law, the agents of the state, they are nowhere to be found. And seem to read that the provisions of the laws of the land as far as aviation is concerned is carried into force. Having said that, I'm also looking at this issue from the constitutional perspective.
Yeah.
This incident took place on the 10th of August, and she was arraigned and subsequently remanded on the 11th of August. Now, the question is this: taking a look at Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution, especially as it pertains to the fundamental rights of citizens, could it be said that she was given adequate time and facilities to prepare for her defense? I think the answer is no, because in as much as the law is that any person who is arrested is to be arraigned in a court of law within a time frame of 24 hours, and in case of unavailability of a court of law within a circumference of given a circumference within the place where the person was detained, within the time frame of 48 hours. Now the question is this: won't it be viewed by a reasonable human being, a rational thinking human being, that justice was hastily dispensed? Because it is said that justice delayed is justice denied. Mm-hmm. Likewise, justice hastily dispensed is also justice denied. I think she wasn't given the opportunity to assert that constitutional right to fair hearing, which includes the right to adequately prepare for one's defense. Now, secondly, I'm also being bothered about the laws upon which she was charged to court. In the first instance, in Nigeria, we have some situations whereby there are many laws that take care of a given issue. For instance, the offense of armed robbery. We have a special law called the Armed Robbery and Firearms Act that takes care of the crime of armed robbery. However, the offense of armed robbery is also recognized in other laws like the criminal code laws of various states and criminal code. In other words, for one to be prosecuted for the crime of armed robbery, for instance, the state will now decide on the law to rely on in prosecuting the offending party. Why did I raise this analogy? If you take a look at the Civil Aviation Act of 2022, to the best of my knowledge, anything pertaining to the aviation sector, civil aviation sector in Nigeria, is governed by the provisions of that law. And by virtue of the provisions of that particular law, the Civil Aviation Act of 2022, it is the Federal High Court that is seized with jurisdiction to try that particular offense. In which case, ordinarily, even the Commissioner of Police, as an entity in law, does not have the powers subject to the general powers of the police, portion to the Police Act, to prosecute offenders. The Commissioner of Police does not ordinarily have the powers to prosecute that particular matter. In which case, it is the officials of the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority that have the powers to do that. That was not to be the case. Most importantly, she was arraigned in the wrong court. Wrong in quotes. Why did I say in quotes? For instance, the offense of murder. Let me also use this analogy. The offense of murder is to be tried by a high court. A magistrate court cannot try the offense of murder. Notwithstanding, when one is charged to court with the offense of murder, one is to be ordinarily arraigned at the magistrate court. But once that is done, one will be automatically be remanded in prison custody. That was what happened to this lady. Because ordinarily, the magistrate court ordinarily does not have the jurisdiction to entertain this matter. This Federal High Court. Assuming she was arraigned at the Federal High Court, maybe there would have been an opportunity for her to apply for her bail if she had access to the services of a legal practitioner. But having been arraigned at the magistrate court, she found herself at the correctional facility center of the Nigerian Correctional Service. And secondly, I know that she was also charged pursuant to the laws of Lagos State. And that's why I know there's a particular provision in Civil Aviation Act. I have come across that provision, which said, notwithstanding the provisions of any other law, that anything pertaining to the civil aviation industry in Nigeria is to go by this particular law. In other words, in law, we may have what we refer to as general laws. We may also have what we refer to as specific law for a given issue. Like taxation, you may have laws that will take care of other issues bordering on taxation, but if you're talking about taxation in Nigeria, there are specific laws, and you must take a look at the provisions of that specific laws in addressing issues that border on taxation. So, as far as civil aviation sector is concerned, it is Civil Aviation Act of 2022, in which case, ordinarily, they shouldn't have resorted to these other provisions of the law in prosecuting her.
Okay, so now talking about the law, and under the Nigerian law, according to what I read, the Anti-Torture Act and what our constitution guarantees, does it really provide dignity and protection, as they said, seeing that all these things were faulted?
Before I proceed, let me make something clear at this juncture. Let it not be as if we are trying to encourage or condone any form of behavior that does not resonate with decency. What am I trying to say? I am not trying to hold grief for the lady. I wouldn't have known what she did before the altercation erupted. And in which case, I will also advise Nigerians that common sense dictates that in the interest of peace and societal cohesion, that we are expected to respect simple rules which are put in place for the betterment of the generality of the public. Because if you take a look at the Civil Aviation Act of 2022, there was specific mention of the fact that the crew of a particular aircraft, they have the right to direct the activities that will take place in an aircraft, including directing passengers to make use of their mobile phones in a way that will not adversely affect the operations of a flight. It is expressly, in fact, there was express reference to the fact that passengers are to make use of their mobile phones in line with the directives given by the crew, expressly stated. But beyond that, coming to the direct question you asked, the Anti-Torture Act is even a subsidiary legislation to the Nigerian Constitution. That particular provision of the law is a wonderful provision of the law. But beyond the Anti-Torture Act, Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution, as well as the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Ratification and Enforcement Act, these two basic laws, they have laid down various fundamental rights to be enjoyed by Nigerian citizens. Even prisoners, those who are in custody, are to enjoy these rights. Now, having said that, prima facie, the fundamental rights of this lady, they are violated. Various fundamental rights. She wasn't given the right of hearing, prima facie. I'm using the word prima facie because, there's still a presumption. You have to give the other person the benefit of that. Her right to the dignity of human person was violated. Because the question is this: the video clip of her cleavage being made public, who circulated that video clip? In fact, if you take a look at Section 93 of the Civil Aviation Act, the provision of that law also empowers the management or the authorities of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority to take the video coverage of any incident that will be resorted to in proving any case as per what transpired, like an issue of this nature. But that does not authorize you to make it public. The video coverage you are empowered to take is that which will be used for the purpose of proving any case. It does not mean you now make it public. So, despite the moral standing or whatever, the person who released that video clip from that particular environment has a very strong case to answer. And even the management, assuming the management that are not directly involved, that means they are negligent. Because the question is this: an altercation of that nature was taking place, and some other person, a third party, to the video coverage of that. So what were you doing? What were others doing at that particular point in time when that video clip was taken? Because the rights of that passenger should be protected. In a nutshell, both the provisions of the Anti-Torture Act and the provisions of Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution and the provisions of the African Charter on Human Rights, these provisions were manifestly violated and to the detriment of the lady. And I just hope that what happened will not adversely affect her to a great extent. I hope that people will reach out to her. As I said earlier, I'm not holding brief for her. I may even have some reservations personally about some of her actions, but that's my own personal business. The same way we all have our personal baggages to carry. But taking a look at what has transpired, I just hope she will not suffer much emotional trauma because it's a national embarrassment.
Yes.
It's not a national embarrassment. It's an embarrassment that has acquired national notoriety. You know, as if her human dignity. Exactly, that's another fundamental right. The right to the dignity of a human person has been greatly violated, and that's why I say from the word go that, irrespective of whoever may be right or wrong in this entire episode, that the management of Ibom Air and the authorities of the authorities of the aviation sector who are there present, they didn't manage this issue in a professional manner. And most importantly, lest I forget, assuming she's even wrong, going by the conventional laws of Nigeria, because she's a female person, she's to be arrested or apprehended by female police officers or female law enforcement, and that's the law. Except if there's a situation whereby you don't have female police officers or female law enforcement agents in the situation of emergency. That's when a male police officer is expected to act. That is the convention, that is the law, and they have also erred in that regard. So whenever any issue has to do with a woman, female law enforcement agents are expected to attend to the woman. Just like if people are to undergo search of their premises or their body, you don't expect a male police officer to search the body of a female police. It's been done by a female police officer, but that was not really the case from what we saw. So maybe if it were to be a trap, they fell into that trap, because now we have left what I refer to as the main issue. Main issue is this: what actually transpired between the lady and the crew members. We are now talking about the ancillary issue, which has now become a fundamental issue, because we are not talking about fundamental rights, in which case, even if of a truth she erred, you have to look at the punishment that attaches to the act, the alleged act of hers. The punishment is imprisonment of a period of not less than 2 months, or a fine of 200,000 naira, or both. In which case, even if she's found guilty, the court may say, okay, pay fine of 200,000 naira, or go to prison for a period of 1 year. But that will not, in any manner whatsoever, erode her right as a Nigerian citizen, as guaranteed by the Constitution. That will not make it impossible for her to assert her rights as guaranteed by law. In other words, the management of Ibom Air, they can be held responsible for what they did in law. The Civil Aviation Authority or the officials of the Civil Aviation Authority, they can also be held culpable for abdication of responsibility, irrespective of whatever may be the outcome of any act she may have alleged to have committed.
Okay, so moving forward, do you think that we need the Passengers' Rights Charter in Nigeria, and what do you think should contain in it?
We have it's in existence. We have aviation law, even though it's not a popular area of law in Nigeria. We have air and space law. Apart from that, we have the Civil Aviation Act. But you know, one thing about Nigeria is that even those of us who are in the legal profession, we tend to accord attention in areas that we already have an army of professionals who have already made a name for themselves in those areas. Air and space law is a thriving area of law in Nigeria, but many of us don't have interest in that particular. The point, if you even look at Section 50 of this Civil Aviation Act, Section 50 of this particular law recognizes various international conventions on the use of airlines, on civil aviation safety. And most importantly is the fact that these conventions are to operate in Nigeria subject to the provisions of the Nigerian Constitution. So there are rights, because the aviation industry is not totally regulated by domestic laws. They are also being regulated by international conventions like the Chicago Convention, the Geneva Convention. These conventions, they are applicable. And these conventions, they have indirectly been made part of the Nigerian Constitution, part of the municipal laws in Nigeria. Because by making reference to the Nigerian Constitution, by virtue of Section 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, it envisages that for any international convention to be applicable in Nigeria, it must be domesticated. Now, if it is domesticated, by virtue of that same Section 50, it must be in line with the Nigerian Constitution, because it didn't make specific reference to Section 12 of the Nigerian Constitution. It just said that it will be applicable in Nigeria subject to the Nigerian Constitution. So having said that, automatically, Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution applies to the rights of all Nigerian citizens who make use of the services of the aviation industry. But we should also appreciate the fact that one's right ends where another person's right begins. So the fact that as a Nigerian citizen you are expected to enjoy it doesn't mean you now disobey rules and regulations, because there are rules and regulations put in place for the safety of the aircraft. You should also do good to consult your lawyer. If you're a Nigerian citizen, if you're a regular user of our airspace, to know the rules and regulations inherent in our laws, both in statutory laws, in conventions, common law principle, even the rules governing a breach of contract. Those normally complain every now and then that their flights are being cancelled. You should consult your lawyers. But here in this part of the country, we don't normally like consulting lawyers. But issues of this nature, because there are many challenges in the aviation sector. Today we are talking about the saga that transpired between Miss Comfort and the Able management. There are other issues. The way at times Nigerians have been extorted in our airports. At times when you get to our airports, you feel embarrassed. When you visit many other nations of the world, the airport is like an entrance into a nation. Even if the nation is having issues, you find law enforcement agents, you find the officials of the airport comporting themselves and it's pretending as if all is well. But in Nigeria, we don't even hide the shame of the nation in our airports. You walk into the airport, upon disembarking, you are being extorted, people are greeting you, but the way they are greeting you, they are not greeting you for the sake of welcoming you, they are indirectly telling you that you should drop something. The embarrassment and all whatnot.
Because of time, Barrister, we cannot just talk about this without, looking for a way forward. What do you think should be done?
What I think should be done is that there should be one serious sensitization of the workings of the law. The officials, or better still, the stakeholders of the aviation sector should be well tutored on the workings of the law. Secondly, airline operators should also appreciate the fact that it is said that customers are kings. I think it may not be a bad idea for them to be making what I refer to as a publicity on various social media handles on the various rights, obligations, and responsibilities of their customers and prospective customers. This will be an avenue to educate the public, because this issue, for instance, has thrown up the controversy on whether mobile phones should be switched off or whether mobile phones should be put on airplane mode. So airline operators, the owners of airlines, should be able to create platforms, even on social media, through which they will educate their customers and prospective customers. And then air and space law should be, it is not made a compulsory course in our institutions of learning, our law faculties, should be made to become a burden, or better still, an area of law that the government today should accord attention to. Because I am yet to count the number of Nigerian universities that offer air and space law. On a very serious note, it's only in a country like the United States, like if you go to Southern Texas Methodist University, it's a very wonderful area of law there. If you go to their university, so these are some steps you have to take to enlighten the public.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Barrister. These issues cannot just be overemphasized. I mean, I believe that Nigeria can actually do better in providing all these things. But then to you viewers and to Nigerians, you should first of all know your right. That is being aware of the do's and the don'ts. And thank you so much, Barrister, for joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure.
We have come to the end of this particular show. And moving forward, we're going to be bringing you the standard of teaching and learning in private universities of Nigeria. And on that show is our very Reverend and Professor Christian Anieke, the Vice Chancellor of Godfrey Okoye University. Do stay with us.